It is Thanksgiving time again, and as tradition, we're going to be making 6 recipes that we would not make any other time of the year. In particular, today we're going to be making pecan pie, cranberry sauce, mulled wine, sweet potato casserole, roasted pumpkin, and maple-glazed carrots. Because even though these aren't flavors that are particularly sought after, I think that by trying to match these flavors, we'll get to try some techniques that we otherwise might not think to use. It'll also give us another opportunity to use some Thanksgiving leftovers. And I think these recipes are going to give us a little bit more trouble than the ones we've tried in the past. A raw pumpkin flavor is not something that I would want in the bottle. Roasted pumpkin, though, is quite delicious. Very sweet, very fluffy. And by roasting them, we're going to bring out some new flavors. We're going to get rid of some old flavors. By the Maillard reaction, or browning, we're going to be producing hundreds more new flavors. And as it cooks, it's going to steam, which is going to concentrate the flavor inside. But that leads us to a second problem, because with very little water left inside, we won't be able to throw it into the juicer. So to get these flavors, we have to do something like steep it. But if we steep it in water, we'll just have defeated the purpose of what we just did by letting it evaporate and concentrate the flavor. Steeping it in kombucha presents its own problem, because for a fruit puree, if you put it directly into the bottle, you would want to fill up about 20% of the bottle's total volume. And for my bottles, that would be about 1/3 of a cup of puree. And I don't want 1/3 of a cup of puree in my bottle. For kombucha, I typically use pure juice just so that I can maximize how much kombucha I actually have in each bottle. So to avoid that, we're using a technique that I've never tried before, which is a 3-stage fermentation. Typically, I use a 2-stage. In the first part, you ferment your sweet tea with the starter to make a full batch of kombucha. And then in the second stage, you can combine both flavoring and bottle conditioning, carbonation. 3 stages, you might imagine, breaks those into separate components. We are going to make our kombucha, we're going to flavor our kombucha, then we're going to strain everything out and just carbonate it. In this case, we're going to completely finish our first stage and then do the rest without oxygen. And any sugar that we lose to carbonation, we're just going to add back for the 3rd stage. Since each of these dishes is going to require its own cookery, I think we need to tackle one problem at a time. For our roasted pumpkin, since we don't care about the texture, we want to maximize how much water we're going to lose to evaporation and our browning. That's where we're going to get most of our flavor from. And since they can be a little bit difficult to cut, I'm going to be removing the stem and then microwaving it for 1 minute to loosen it up a little bit. This is a pie pumpkin, so it is a little bit sweeter than usual. After 1 minute, it is slightly warmer. Not noticeably easier to cut. For my bottles, if I fill 20% of it with the fruit pulp, that comes to about 1/3 of a cup of cooked puree. And this should be enough. Now, normally we would use oil to help with the browning, but since this is kombucha, we want to avoid fats, so we are going to instead use a bit of baking soda. This will help raise the pH of the surface, which should allow it to brown a little bit better. I'm just going to keep a close eye on these and turn them every once in a while until they're ready. These are looking pretty good, so I think we are ready to make our first puree. But for our puree, we're going to need our kombucha. And our kombucha this week is half oolong, half black. And we'll set this aside to make next week's batch. To a blender, I'm going to add a little over 1/3 of a cup of roasted pumpkin. And then about 350 grams of kombucha. After we've topped it off with kombucha, I am going to leave it sit at room temperature for 3 days, just to let those flavors mingle. For pecan pie, we run into a couple issues right off the bat. Pecans are very high in oil content, and we don't want oil in our kombucha because that could go rancid and ruin the entire bottle. We also ran into a problem because pecan pie, it's more of a dessert of textures, in my opinion. It's more about the caramel-like brown sugar, the butter, sometimes the corn syrup, and the crunch of the pecan. If you think about the flavor, it's almost pure sugar. But we don't want to replicate just sugar because just sugar is a plain kombucha that's not particularly interesting. So we're going to do a few things. Normally what I would do with a high-fat nut like this is to find an extract. Something I was hoping to do in this case, but apparently pecan extract is not a commonly sought-after flavor in my neighborhood. So instead we are going to toast it. We're going to break it down. We're going to steep it. And make a brown sugar simple syrup out of it. Something very similar to what we did with our orgeat last time. We are going to strain all of our liquid. And in this case, it's about 1/3 of a cup. We are going to add it back to our pot, along with an equal amount of brown sugar. Once this dissolves over medium heat, it should be ready to use. For our pecan syrup, we do have a little bit of an oil sheen on top that I'm going to try to avoid. But I'm going to add 31 grams of our pecan syrup. I'm adding 1 gram of butter extract, 1 gram of vanilla extract, and a light dash of cinnamon before topping off with our kombucha. This is going to go for 3 days at 78 to 80 degrees. For our sweet potato casserole, this is based off a recipe that my aunt makes, which I have yet to ever try because it looks disgusting. We are looking for cooked sweet potato flavor with marshmallow on top and a bit of brown sugar inside. And we are going to start with the sweet potatoes, and we're going to start with the method very similar to what we did with our pumpkin. We are going to peel these, dice them, toss them with baking soda, and bake them until they're browned. And then we are going to make our puree. And as before, we're looking to make about 1/3 of a cup of puree. For our sweet potato casserole, we have our roasted sweet potatoes. But what we don't have is our toasted marshmallow topping. And I want to maximize browning, so I'm going to tear this into 2. Oh. Your remaining approximate 1 tablespoon of marshmallow, toasted marshmallow, goes into the blender, along with a little over 1/3 of a cup of toasted sweet potato, and then 350 grams of our kombucha. It smells like sweet potatoes. This is going to steep for 3 days as well. Yeah. For our maple-glazed carrots, we're combining 1/3 of a pound of carrots, 2 teaspoons of brown sugar, and 1 tablespoon of maple syrup. I'm going to cook this on medium-low for about 20 minutes, just to soften it all. Our maple-glazed carrots have finished, and they are quite a bit softer. These should be ready to blend. I'm just using a little bit of the kombucha to loosen up some of this maple sugar. And once again, we're adding about 350 grams of kombucha. This one will also steep for 3 days at room temperature before we worry about carbonation. For our cranberry sauce, we're starting with an orange juice simple syrup. 1 part orange juice to 1 part white sugar. This goes on medium heat until dissolved. Once the sugar is dissolved, I'm adding 6 ounces of cranberries. These I'm going to continue to cook on medium until they start to pop, which should be about 10 minutes. Now we just need to cool it, blend it, find the bricks, and add it to our bottle. As it's cooled, the cranberry sauce is thickened up quite a bit. It does taste like cranberry sauce though. This comes out to about 41.6% sugar. That means we need about 36 grams of the sauce in our kombucha. But quite good. This is going to ferment for 3 days at 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit until carbonated. For our mulled wine, I'm adding about half a bottle of red wine, 5 ounces of brandy, the juice of 1 orange, and in fact, I'm going to add in the pulp as well. 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and then 3 cloves, 2 cardamom pods, and 1 cinnamon stick, all lightly crushed. Bring it to a boil over medium. Once at a boil, I'm going to drop it to low and simmer for 30 minutes. Our mulled wine came out to 20.8% sugar, so we are going to add 96 grams of it to our kombucha bottle. And like any mulled wine, it's got this sort of sickly sweet European cough syrup sort of flavor. So do we want that to shine through? Not really, but hopefully that gives us enough to, I don't know. This we're carbonating 3 days, 78 to 80 degrees. 3 days have passed and now our flavoring stage should be complete. We do have quite a bit of sediment floating around. And since we pureed all of our fruits and vegetables, I think we are going to need our tighter knit cheesecloth to strain it. But I want to make sure this doesn't explode, so we're going to do this carefully. Or not. Small pause to clean this up. All right, now that the ceiling is clean again, we are going to continue. I guess it's a good thing it's been so cold here recently, because otherwise I think I might have lost an eye. But it's not called careful booch. Going to give this a quick taste test, make sure we're on track. It does taste like roasted pumpkin kombucha, very much like sweet potato. I think this is going to be good. I'm going to see how much we have in the bottle here. It's about half a bottle's worth. With the amount of roasted pumpkin that we added, that should have been about 3 grams of sugar. And it does taste quite dry. So before topping off with more kombucha, I'm going to add 24 grams of brown sugar syrup. This is just 1 part brown sugar to 1 part water. Then to top it off, I have just plain unsweetened kombucha. I am a little concerned that we only have half the volume left, though. does make me worry if we've lost too much, and now the pumpkin flavor is not going to stand out. But this is going to get another 3 days, this time at 78 to 80 degrees. For our sweet potato casserole, I am very scared and nervous. I don't want to do this. I feel like I should be doing it outside. Wah! All right, don't make this recipe. Let's see what this tastes like. It's not bad. It is sweeter than the pumpkin for sure. It does have that richer, earthier sweet potato taste. I'm not sure I get any marshmallow though. But I'm not sure I want any more marshmallow, if that makes sense. This looks like a little less than half the bottle this time. Although I would say that I don't think it's because we lost that much. I think it's because since we started with so much pulp, we didn't start with very much. From the marshmallow before, we had about 12 grams of sugar. We had about 3 grams of sugar from the sweet potato that we put into it. So it's already sweeter than the pumpkin was. We're only going to add 6 grams of brown sugar syrup. And then top it off with more plain kombucha. Finally, we've got our Maple-Glazed Carrots, our fullest bottle by far. I am exceptionally nervous. I don't know what else we can do other than pray and rethink the content of our show. It is a fun lesson in how pulp alone can produce a lot of carbonation. It does just look like a bunch of carrot puree. Let's see how our carrot tastes. It does taste distinctly like carrots. There is some sort of extra sweetness in there. I don't know if it's distinctly maple, but it's pretty good. It's still a little effervescent. Got a carrot sweetness, but not that raw carrot taste. And yeah, it's got that extra dimension of either the brown sugar or the maple syrup. So I think this one's going to be all right. We did end up with a lot more volume on this one, too. For this dish, we should have had about 7 grams of sugar for the carrots, 9 grams for the brown sugar, and about 14 grams of sugar for the maple syrup. We definitely didn't carry all of that into the bottle, but I think we carried a lot of it. So I'm only going to add another 4 grams of maple syrup. All right, that was intense, but we are done. And these are just going to sit for 2 days at 78 to 80 degrees. And then we can have our Thanksgiving feast. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. After 2 days of carbonation plus another day in the refrigerator, I think we're ready to just jump right into this. We are going to start with our roasted pumpkin, which has calmed down considerably. Some decent carbonation there. And it does smell a bit like roasted pumpkin. And it does taste a bit like roasted pumpkin. Up front, it's very much the classic black tea kombucha. A little apple cidery, there's some sweetness, some tartness. But on the back, there's definitely a lot more pumpkin taste. I don't know if it's a welcome taste for a kombucha, though. It is very sour and sweet up front. And then it just kind of trails into that kind of pumpkin flavor that coats your tongue. It's not bad. It's not quite as strong of a pumpkin flavor as I would hope for. It's kind of fun. It's not bad. I can definitely drink the whole bottle of it. I think I would want some other taste, though, beyond roasted pumpkin. It does taste like roasted pumpkin. It's just, well, like you might expect. I don't know if that's a great kombucha flavor. Moving on. From our pie pumpkin, we're going to go straight into its counterpart, the sweet potato casserole. Noticeably thicker, more opaque. Just kind of smells like kombucha. Ooh, it tastes thicker. Ooh, tastes very strongly of sweet potato, but somehow not in a bad way, not yet. Good carbonation. It's good sour. A lot of that earthy sweet potato taste. I get none of the marshmallow. It is very distinctly sweet potato. And I feel like I made a mistake not adding a second marshmallow. I think I want that caramelized sugar and that vanilla taste of the marshmallow. I feel like that would be a great balance to this. It's pretty good though. If you like sweet potatoes, and I do, this tastes very much like a roasted sweet potato. I mean, I wouldn't choose it over a normal kombucha flavor though, but it's pretty good. We are moving right along to cranberry sauce. Whoop. Solid carbonation on that one. There are little flakes cranberry in there, just like little shredded slivers. Very sour smell. Kind of gross with all that grit. I do get the sourness, and I do get a hint of the bitterness. I just don't get any distinct flavor of cranberry or orange. All the little bits of cranberry skin are a little disconcerting though. Don't think I like that. It's okay, it just doesn't taste like anything very specific. And I think these little cranberry flecks are throwing me off, so let's try it without that. It's okay. It's a little too cloyingly sweet, bitter, but not in like an interesting way. It doesn't taste like cranberry bitterness. It's just kind of coats the tongue. I had high hopes for this one. There's so much grit. Ah. Moving on to our vegetable course, we have our maple-glazed carrots. Still as active as ever. And oh my, is it orange. It's got a very earthy, yeasty funk to it. A little overcarbonated, very distinctly carrot taste. When we tried it before, it had a very cooked carrot taste, and then it kind of faded away quickly. It was very light and refreshing. But I feel like maybe it's because I'm drinking more of it now, or maybe it was that extra time the yeast had to add a little funky flavor. It's kind of just a very full-bodied carrot taste, more like eating a raw carrot. It lingers. It is kind of the full spectrum of carrot flavors. I don't really taste maple. I don't really taste brown sugar. It is sweet and sour. It's just kind of like we blended up a bunch of raw carrots. I think maybe we should have done what we did with the potato and pumpkin and cut it up really small so it had more of a chance to cook. And I think if we had gone harder on the maple syrup, I think that flavor would have come through a little bit more. I don't know if we would have wanted to add more of it though, just because of how explosive this was. Maybe if we had dialed back on the carrot a little bit, we could have added more maple syrup, because I want more of a cooked carrot taste and I want more maple taste. This just tastes to me like a carrot kombucha. Not entirely pleasant. Moving on to dessert, we have our pecan pie. Looks clear, looks well carbonated. There's a thick little pellicle on top that I'm trying to throw away. Yuck. I can actually see the oil floating on top, all that fat from the pecan. Smells weirdly fruity. It's throwing me off because it tastes like a cream soda. A cream soda with a hint of butter. It's very much the sugar. It's very sour because it's kombucha. That part's weird. And then from the vanilla, it's very much a cream soda. There is actually a hint of pecan, though, on the very back end, just kind of as a breathe out. I think the butter and the vanilla was a mistake because this is very much a cream soda. There is a pecan there. It is pleasantly sweet. I feel like if we had just dialed back on the extract, maybe just a tiny drop of vanilla instead of a whole gram, I'm not sure I'm getting any cinnamon. It's not bad. It's a little disconcerting because I can just see all these little oil droplets on top. And that can't be healthy. So it's kind of just like an oily sour cream soda. Surprisingly drinkable, but not distinctly a pecan pie. It's also just kind of weird. It's kind of weirded me out. It's so weird. And finally, to wind down this evening, we have our mulled wine. It's like sticking your face in a bowl full of potpourri. The spices are 1,000% more prominent than they were in the mulled wine, where I thought the spices were too prominent. I'm going to try to drink this without breathing. Okay. I don't like mulled wine. I think it's sickly sweet and gross, which I've said before. I thought that by using under 10% of it, that I could hide that flavor somewhat, that I could mellow it out, that I could make it a little bit more palatable. Somehow it just supercharged everything gross about it. It's too pungent. You can't take a breath near it. It like sucks out the air from your lungs. It's too sickly sweet. It's too sour. It's just deeply, deeply unpleasant. It's like someone left a cinnamon stick under a couch since the 70s. This is undrinkable and disgusting. So what did we learn here? What's the lesson? If you're going to use a 3-stage fermentation, I would say let it steep in the refrigerator for those 2 to 3 days. That's going to help the liquid hold on to that carbonation a little bit better, so it's not going to get all over the ceiling. I think for these earthy, starchy vegetables, I'm not sure if it's pleasant to have those taste just as they are. I think the kombucha needs it paired with something to just balance that out a little bit. Some other flavor just to help round it out a little bit, because otherwise it's kind of just like a sour mouthful of mashed potatoes. The cranberry sauce was pretty surprising because that is something I think people have left over at the end of Thanksgiving. It wasn't quite interesting enough. I'm not sure why. I feel like I would have to tinker with that recipe a little bit. I think if the cranberry and the orange juice weren't cooked, perhaps they'd be a little bit more interesting. That would be something I would play around with if I thought it had more potential. And I would say the same goes for the pecan pie. I feel like it could be interesting if you were really dedicated to the cause. I don't see it though. But it was fun to play around with 3-stage fermentation, so it's at least good to know that it's viable, yet also very scary. And now I'm off to prepare for a Christmas episode. So, thank you for joining us. This is Reckless Booch. I'm not going to take a drink of this.